National Security Advisor John Bolton is blaming Iran for an attack on 4 oil tankers at a port in the United Arab Emirates. Iran has rejected the claim as ridiculous.
Meanwhile, roughly 1,500 U.S. troops are being sent to the Middle East region to act as a, quote, deterrent against Iranian threats. Joining us with his take on tensions in the Middle East and how it's being handled is former National Security Advisor under President Barack Obama, General James Jones. He's the former Commandant of the Marine Corps, former Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, and former Special Envoy for Middle East Security. General, welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Tensions with Iran rising. A lot of news coverage of this recently. People are very concerned. Even some reports there may be additional forces perhaps sent to the region as either a counterbalance, a threat, a who knows what comes next. What do you make of the Trump administration's approach to Iran right now?
I think it's the correct approach. I think Iran is undeserving of any sentiment that would lead anyone to believe that they're trying to do the right thing or trying to change their ways. They're the #1 exporter of terror in the world. They're supporting the war in Yemen. They're trying to destabilize North Africa and the sub-Saharan Africa. And they have shown me, and I think others like me, that they are unrepentant in terms of their ways. And so I think that the policy is correct. I think we should continue to put as much pressure on Iran, and I think that that will perhaps trigger and encourage the people of Iran to believe that they have a better future by having a different type of government.
Are there any forces inside the Iranian government that you see as being constructive, that may be trying to be more constructive on the global scene than the mullahs?
We've heard about different people every now and then, that they're moderates and they're.
Yeah, I never use the word moderate because I feel like that's not really the way they would describe themselves.
You're absolutely right. If they are, they're not very effective, and I think the forces that surround the leadership are keeping a close hold on the power.
Where do you think this is all heading with Iran? There are concerns that this could lead to conflict between the U.S. and Iran, obviously, but what end state do you see based on the continued application of pressure, sanctions, and just the general trajectory right now?
I mean, the nice thing I like about our policy is that I'm quite sure that the Iranians have no idea what President Trump might do. And that in itself is, I think, a good thing. They're off balance, and they might wake up, one morning and find they no longer have a navy, for example. So I think that policy is useful for a regime like the Iranian government. But on the other hand, I think that economic sanctions and trying to build a coalition of like-minded nations to understand that appeasement does not work with
So was the pullout from the Iran deal the right move?
I'm sorry?
Was the pullout from the Iran deal the right move in your opinion?
Yeah, in my opinion, it was. I think we wanted that deal too badly. I think we obviously paid too much for it, and we didn't get. I think people were hopeful that would trigger a lessening of tensions and more understanding between people, and the government would start respecting human rights and all of that. Didn't happen. Not going to happen. This is a tyranny, and there's only one way tyrannies leave office.
So this is not the only negotiation or fight America will ever be in. What happens when an American government enters into a compact with another government, making certain promises and conditions? That government does not necessarily violate those promises and conditions, but the American government pulls out. What does that do for our future negotiating capacity and ability to navigate relationships around the world?
Well, that's a good question, but I think the answer is that there are times when even as fair-minded as we are, that we realize we made a mistake, and that the expectations, while maybe following the letter of the law, the letter of the agreement, but in the overall sense of things, the enormity of what the Iranian regime is doing in many parts of the world and what they're doing to their own citizens is just unforgivable. And for the life of me, I don't understand why the community of nations continues to deal with them as someone that is a respected government.
This gets to a broader point to me. I think you started down this line a little bit ago about the Iranians not understanding what the president may be up to and what America may do next. It's not just our opponents who are off balance by the uncertainty. It seems like our allies are also off balance. What does that do to the American standing when even the people who we sign up to help us when we go into conflict don't quite know where we stand, what our objectives are, and how we're going to go about executing them?
So, I mean, in my view, what a president does is extremely important. Almost every day that he's in office, how he does it is very important as well. And on that score, we have some mending offenses to do in terms of our friends and allies. And that's just my personal view as a former national security advisor, somebody who spent a fair amount of time around the world influencing people, trying to build coalitions, try to keep strong allies, make NATO into something that is a very important coalition of almost 30 countries now. So how you do it is important, and on that score there are some things that probably need to be fixed.
How would you score the administration's approach to North Korea, those ongoing negotiations, obviously incredibly high stakes? Do you think that it was the right move to open up talks, and how are those talks going?
Well, I don't know any more than what I read and I hear about on programs like yours. But I think
somehow I think that's not exactly.
I think it's the right. I think the right thing to do is to talk to people. I mean, at least open the doors. And I think that was a breakthrough of sorts. But I'm also of the opinion that the real whatever happens in North Korea is only going to happen if China wants it to happen. And that's the big problem.
You mentioned you were National Security Advisor for President Obama. What do you think about the current National Security Advisor? Helpful, or is he making the world more complicated?
John, I think is first of all, it's very important that the National Security Advisor and the President have a very, very good relationship, and I think they have that.
Despite recent reports.
Well,
they disagree on some things, but they
disagree on some things,
personally get along.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be surprised if some of it was intentional, to the good cop, bad cop routine. But I think I think John has the trust and confidence of the president. You don't hear a lot of things about John that you heard about other.
When this president doesn't like someone, by the way, we tend to find out in pretty clear terms. You mentioned China and the role with North Korea, and obviously those two are very inextricably linked. The 5G race and the national security implications of both Chinese innovation and theft of innovation, which those two go hand in hand as well. Why should people pay attention to 5G? Why does this really matter? It's something that you're very up on.
Well, 5G is I think, kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of which country is going to be the dominant power in the world by the end of the century, if not sooner. 5G is transformational. It's disruptive technology. It'll change everything that we do, how we work, how we play, how we entertain ourselves. But it gets to be extremely important when you talk about 5G being much faster than 4G. The latency of 5G is much, much shorter. It's measured in milliseconds. But what's really important about 5G is secure 5G. And that is that's the battle. And secure 5G allows you to think of having things like smart cities. You will not have a smart city if you don't have secure 5G. Imagine driverless cars by the hundreds running around a city, and somebody can penetrate the mechanism and control these cars. I mean, you could have 1,000 accidents if somebody wanted to. So secure 5G is really the key. And the United States is on the verge of producing just that kind of technology. And it will be, as I said, transformational and disruptive, but it will also protect national secrets because it's not penetrable. It'll protect intellectual properties of large companies, and it could even get down to the individual if you wanted to make sure that your phone was totally secure. There have been tests run on American technology by red teams that have failed to penetrate the technology. So that's very good. Nothing's forever, but this is extremely important.
Yeah, just to get technical about this for a minute, one of the ways 5G works is that it's really software based more than it's just wires and telecommunication.
It's actually mostly wireless.
Right,
yeah.
but it's software that apportions the network out to different uses, right? So the question arises: if if software is so integral, is any software package really impenetrable? You talk about security.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's impenetrable forever, because after 5G, there's going to be 6G. It's going to keep going. But for the moment, at least, the technology that I've seen is very encouraging in terms of being able to cut off the penetration that we're getting into our corporate sectors and our government sectors, where national secrets and intellectual properties are vulnerable. My military records, along with those a couple of million others, is in China, as a result of the OPM hack a few years ago. Now,
Me too, General.
It'll make good reading for some Chinese official who has had trouble going to sleep at night. But we have got to we've got to get beyond this. And I think the United States, what we need to do now is we need to get the government involved with the private sector. Right now, it's the private sector in the U.S. that's dominating this race, and we desperately need the government backing, sort of a coalition of public and private sector working together, because the competition, China, has the central government basically running Huawei and other countries like it, and pouring millions of dollars into this race that they're intent on winning. In 1957, I was a kid in France, and I picked up a paper one day. I was 13 years old, and I read a headline that said, "Russians beat U.S. into space by launching Sputnik." I don't want to see that headline about China and 5G technology. And 5G technology is the tip of the iceberg. We've got quantum computing, we've got artificial intelligence, all of those things that the Chinese have decided is going to be their domain, and they're going to control the global infrastructure as much as they can. And on the front page of the newspapers today, you see articles about just how far ahead they are on the marketing of that technology.
General Jones, really appreciate your expertise, sir. Thank you for your service. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for your service.
My pleasure.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
More Rising coming up.